Well, the section is called Sustainable Revitalization. And I think if you're going to sitting here for already 3 presentations, it's not going to be sustainable. So may I use at least just 1 minute, okay? Everybody stand up. Revitalize yourself. Stretch a little bit. Smile to your neighbors. Just stretch a little bit. Yeah, just do some revitalization. Come on, stretch a little bit. Get some energy. If you don't get energy, there's no way we can continue for the rest of the afternoon. Thank you very much. Please be seated. I know the 2 speakers are the 2 panel members who is going to follow, is going to give you a little bit of PowerPoint presentation. And I will not do any introduction of them because they're all in the booklet. So can I have Mikam first? Mikam always fascinates me by her smile, her energy and vitality. So sustainable revitalization. Mikam.
All right, so when I first came in, I was a little bit late. And John said, Mikam, what should I ask you? So I showed him my slides. And then he said, so what's your conclusion, okay? So I give you the conclusion before I show you the slides. Basically, I think we should design cities for people's well-being, and that is truly people-centered urban design. So John just reminded us this is about sustainable revitalization. So our question is revitalizing what? Very often we think about cities, spaces, but I want to bring you to the central core element of any design, which should be people-centered. Good design should also be climate friendly as well, so as I will show. So I learned this from my psychology colleagues in the university, this ecological map of health, that we need to remind ourselves that as individuals, we are nested in our built environment through our family, communities, and cities, etc. And there are different kinds of well-being. If we really want to revitalize ourselves, and we need to know about them, and we need to know that the built environment actually has great bearing on our well-being. So to start with, we have physical and emotional well-being. So just now, John demonstrates that it's important for us to have exercise. So according to my recent research, it's actually very important for us to have internal private space. So in that sense, it challenges our urban trend of building smaller and smaller dwellings. So it's actually not very good for our well-being. Externally, it's also very important for us to have spaces for physical activities. So walking a bit more by closing down, sort of like the road and encourage people to walk is actually very good. It's actually good for our well-being. So next time if a boss or their staff ask about that, we need to encourage and also educate them. So green environment is also very important for our emotional well-being as well. And that's related to our satisfaction with life, positive affect, and also our happiness. Another kind of well-being is what psychologists would call psychological well-being. And as you can see, it's related to very often our environment. The mastery of the environment, the autonomy, positive relationships with others, so that we can have personal growth and self-acceptance and purpose in life. I think this morning, we were all very inspired, say, for example, by Chris Law's projects, because his projects allow people to come together, to have positive relationship with others, and also develop that sense of autonomy and also, environmental mastery, so that they probably will, be more prone to have a better purpose in life. So that kind of, environment is also very important for our social well-being, as you can see here. Social acceptance, actualization, contribution, coherence, and integration. We need to design places for people to come together so that they feel being accepted, they can accept others, they can actualize, they can contribute to the community, they can develop social capital, they can feel that kind of integration and coherence, and that's a way forward for us to have our well-being. So in our city, we always see this kind of regeneration or renewal. Well, okay, those who were gone, So how are we going to redesign these places in the future so that people's well-being will be safeguarded? So that would, be my key responses to the discussion earlier on. So that's why I think, Professor Zhu, I don't agree with you about your disadvantaged, spaces. To me, they are centrally essential for any urban areas because we use it, it's full of use value. So those are not disadvantaged, spaces to me in a sense. Thank you.
Thank you, Mikam. Actually, Mikam was mumbling to me, I was like, oh, this is not disadvantaged space, okay? And depending on the perspective we look at it. And the energy actually comes from our youth, our young professionals. So our next panelist is Kenny Mark, one of our, young professionals sharing some of her views.
Okay, hope my voice can reach the far end of the floor. 三頂嘅朋友，你哋好。Actually, it's a very brief self-introduction. My name is Kenny, and I have been with AECOM for about 10 years. For the past few years, I mainly focus on tourism and hospitality projects. So somehow, when we talk about the sustainable revitalization, I would have to share some different point of view from our visitors or outsiders' view. This photo was taken last week in Seoul, and I think it's kind of inspiring when we talk about what can bring a city to the world. It might be the vibrant street life. It might be what's going on the streets and how people can see from this kind of street life and that bring this place to the world. So at the end users of the cities, not only the citizens inside, but also the visitors, they are all share the benefits of the city. So I remember about 5 years ago, another interesting sharing in Shanghai. I talk about one of our project in Taichung, Greenbelt. This is an urban regeneration project, which is utilize the original green belt of the city and try to make it an urban room for the whole city. And by then, to us, the most important thing, I'm not sure how many people from Taiwan are in the room today, but to us, the essence of the city in Taichung is about the humanity and artistic side. So we choose to use the Chinese calligraphy as the design elements and also how it can be implemented to the street furniture, to all the design languages that we have. So I'm happy to see that 5 years later, these are some photos recently taken by our colleagues. So this place has been very well used by the local citizens. And also, I searched some photos from websites. Nowadays, if you go to Taichung for a day trip, most of the people will recommend you to visit this green belt. So it has become to city attractions. It's not only for enhancing local people's daily lives, but it's also to add value to the city's image, to set it up to the international stage. So, well, of course, there's always dilemma about balancing the urban revitalization and the urban gentrification. So, this might be an issue that we always face during this process. And another thing is, these are some typical things that we do with the political side and also from the professional's view. But actually, beyond the professional or academic approach, there's also a lot of other things that we can do. Echoing to the presentation just now that we had, maybe we can think about some other ways how to bring people back to the city rather than or bring the city back to the people. For example, this is something non-related with urban design at all, but I want to share with you. It's one of the events that I went to end of last year. It is an overnight charity walk. This was their 10th year's anniversary. I have started with this walk 10 years ago. So at the very beginning, they chose the routes along the Central Harbor waterfront all the way to Stanley. But recent years, they dropped the idea and they try to explore some different urban areas that you may never go by yourself. For example, this year we will go through the Wang Daxing Temple and all the way to the Chen Kuan-O waterfront. It's by walk, 20 kilometers. It's about 7 hours. So there's an app that you can check your progress along the road. And on the way that we passed through a local village in Lai Yumon. And for this event, as far as I know, it reaches over 8,000 people to join this event. Some of them are actually from outside of Hong Kong. And to them, this is a very unique urban walk experience. They never know that people, Hong Kong has such kind of scene outside of the postcard view. So actually, this is also another way that you can bring the city back to the people. You have 8,000 people walking by. You never know what will happen to these kind of places. Some people will think it's very interesting and might have the advantage value. Or I don't know whether this belongs to Professor Zhu's disadvantaged space, but actually to certain people, they're very unique. And a little bit self-advertisement. I've been working for Hong Kong Tourism Board for about 7 years, promoting the local tourism culture of Hong Kong. So I would like to say this is just one of the samples that we have been through with. Nowadays, more and more public entities or NGOs, they are doing walking tours or different format of activities to try to connect people back to the street, people back to the city. So it could be going through the professional way or other than that. So at the end, no matter it's the disadvantaged space in the city, or we talk about waterfront, we talk about the CBD area. At the end, to me, it's like what Charles Laundrie said, the revitalization of a city is an art. So it depends on the individual strengths of a place, how we define the city, how we define Hong Kong, the strengths as an international metropolitan, and also the view behind. Whether there's a will, there's a leadership to trickle the things to happen. So at the end, it's a cultural infrastructure. So that's my sharing.
Thank you, Kenny. When we are tired, we would like to go for holiday, and the whole idea is try to recharge ourselves after all this weary and tiredness of work or whatever it is. And tourists come to a place because they want to really to be inspired and being charged. So that's why our section today is how to have a sustainable revitalization. So MICAM is very kind enough to kick off this question about disadvantaged space. So maybe the first person I would like to invite to respond to that is Professor Zhu, about that particular response regarding disadvantaged spaces.
Okay, thank you. I like to say again, yeah, the disadvantaged spaces is a positive word. It's not a negative word. It's not a neutral word. Positive. I mean, yeah. So you can see a lot of disadvantaged spaces in Beijing now, and this the first step is marking, place marking. Yeah, I know in my university, my study in university, yeah, the design is not a good word. The teachers always said place making. Making is a good word. Design is sometimes or not sometimes, yeah, it's a very negative word because design make a lot of disasters, yeah, in the world. Yeah. But I like to say design maybe is a bad word, but urban design is a good word. Yeah, it's a very good word, the best word. Yeah, urban design. I like to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Zhu, for the affirmation that urban design is positive and good work. And I just heard from Stanley that our mainland is going to reinforce the status of urban design. And hopefully that will inject more energy into the new urban design. I would like to ask him about another types of energy, because we are talking during lunchtime about, yes, low carbon planning and development, talking about conserving a lot of energy and possibly positive in terms of climate positive. How would you see the important elements in urban design that will actually inject energy, the sort of energy, people energy, about the passion, about the desire to improve a place?
John, that was not a question you told me.
So yes, I think it's a joke. I think the key thing about taking urban design to generate energy from the public, from the people, in my opinion, count on two words: let go. Let go and let go. As designer and sometimes as decision makers and also official, always think they have a solution for the public, while at the same time solution does not really rest in their mind. The decision rests on public's hand and public's mind. So the key thing to actually make sure that you have a successful scheme, I think, is let the public to tell you what they want by letting go your either ego or your professional experience or whatever you believe is true. And I think only when we can arrive at that stage, there will be enough energy. Thank you, Stanley. You sound like my wife. And as I'm getting older, she said, let go, okay, let go, especially to the kids. But somehow, Ian, you still believe that you would like people to change their behavior, and that actually attribute to some of the failure of those projects which cannot survive beyond the drawing board. How strong you still feel that you would like to change people's behavior, or just let go, let them go, you know?
I think there's a lot of problems with designing public space. One of the problems is you don't know who the client is. If we're working on a private project, then the client defines quite closely the objectives. But I get disappointed with public engagement where you go through a process of 2 to 3 years and finish up with something which is insignificant. And so what happens is that if you come up with a proposal, someone will look at it and say, that will affect me in such and such a way. So it's not the design itself that's important. It's the way that the person who's looking at the design will perceive it and how that will affect their behavior, such as the person who wants to go to an event on the harbourfront, but it's actually a whole pile of LCSD gardens. Or the person who's going down DeVoe Road Central at the moment on a bus, and his bus stop's going to move. And that becomes the big issue for them. So your design, no matter what it is going to affect people's behavior. But maybe it's people's perception of the change, which is probably a better description. If someone looks at a design, they're going to say, that's going to affect me in this way. And therefore, I perceive that it's a problem. But others will look at that same picture and say, that's going to affect me by, giving me fresh air. And they will perceive it in a positive manner. So what I'm saying is that design is just a part of a process of changing people's behavior. And in the end, when you finish up with some of those great spaces we've seen today on the images, people's behavior in these spaces will be different because of what's happened through this process of getting to a design.
Thank you. Well, we all understand that as placemakers that our external built environment affect our behavior, and our behavior actually affect the future design of our place of living or working. I'd like to ask some of the speakers to respond to these very, very basic questions of that energy for change, no matter it's going into design or into planning or into development, is a human desire for betterment, for well-being, as Meekum just mentioned. And it is those desires which will create those energy. And as some of those engagement exercises mentioned by some of the speakers this morning, that when people are engaged and being involved and they own that particular place, then comes the energy in participation, even if it's free, even if it's pro bono. I would like to ask some of the speakers from your vast experience, what are your ways of trying to influence decision maker or influence whoever the future users, so that some of those good design which you think of can be really materialized and survive beyond the drawing board? Who would like to respond to that?
Yeah, I think if you go back to Terry Farrell's presentation this morning, the big thing that I think came out of it was education. And it's education of people in the street, but it's education of the decision makers. And part of our process of presenting good ideas to decision makers is that they don't know what you're talking about. And so you have to educate them first. And it's taken us 13 years to try to educate people about DeVoe Road, and we're getting there, Unfortunately, the people we educated 10 years ago are now all retired, so we have to start again. But it's that education process which is really important.
Yeah. I think I can only talk about this from my experience in engaging in some of the low carbon projects in cities in China. I agree with Ian. I think we face the same problem. It's about educating the official, educating the decision makers, educating the public, particularly from the issue of climate change, because it's really, really difficult, even after 10 years now that we've been working on this. It's really difficult to actually to persuade the man on the street to understand what you're talking about in terms of climate change, because they don't feel about it. It's not like noise pollution, it's not like earthquake. They don't feel about it. So when you talk about and ask them to change the behavior or to support certain scheme, it's really difficult because you cannot, and very difficult to actually to localize a global problem at the local context. I think that's very, for us in terms of managing climate change, this is the biggest issue. And of course, the key issue now today is because of the scale of urbanization in China, it's not just the public, even the officials become somebody need to be educated. I've been counting the people I know, and I've been counting the directors of urban bureau in different cities, counting the vice mayor in charge of urban planning and urban construction in different cities. I truly believe that 99.9% of them have never received any education or training on understanding the issue of climate change, not until very, very recently. So it's very difficult for us to do that. The only way to do this is persisting to educate and use all opportunity to actually to tell them what it's all about, and that's the responsibility of professionals like us.
Yeah, I'd like to say a few words. In my opinion, urban design is a kind of integrated design. It means sustainable. It means if we learn more urban design, we can know more energy saving or global, climate change issues. Yeah. So in mainland China, I think we should improve urban design. Yeah, that is the one of the way to Thank you.
Well, perhaps that's a revelation to our OC of the conference that did we ever invite participants from the education department? If not, probably don't leave them out, okay? Just as what Sir Terry mentioned about this morning, about the place theory, okay? Planning, architecture, conservation, you know. I think that's great. Now, I would like to open the floor a little bit. We have some time, so do you have any question you would like to throw out to our panelists? We have the mic ready. Any? Yes, Kim.
Okay, thank you. A brief comment and then maybe a question. The comment is that I also agree I don't much like the word placemaking. I think it has a kind of a top-down tone, as if we who know what places are making, in a sense, inscribing the outcomes. And I think placemaking is as much a bottom-up activity as it is a top-down one. And my favourite misspelling, which once happened to me about 20 years ago when I was hosting a conference called Place and Placemaking, and the literature came back spelled lace-making. And at the time, I thought it was I thought it was a typographical error, but I came to the conclusion slowly since then that that lace making is a very good description of what it is that we're often doing in urban design. We're weaving, intersecting things together in complex ways that are at once transparent, and it's not always clear what the outcomes will be. So I call it lace making, but I don't mind place marking either. Sorry for that long-winded one, but my question in a sense was to Ian. I know you called your paper "It's Not About the Design," probably to be a little bit provocative, but listening to it, I could see it being called "It's All About the Design" as well, because in a sense I felt that you had circumscribed your definition of design a little bit narrowly. I see design as the very task of changing people's perceptions first of all, and then their behaviours. That only when we can imagine a bigger world, when we can sketch the possibilities for the future of the city, which is what the task of designing is doing. It's the enlargement of the urban imaginary. That for me is what design does. And it's absolutely central to changing people's attitudes. Machiavelli, that very well known and somewhat misunderstood, political theorists said that in his advice to political leaders was never try for change that people cannot imagine, that if they can't imagine the future, then they will not support it and that you will fail. And I think that in a democracy, which is, in a sense, what you're talking about is the frustrations of dealing with kind of design by committee. I think we're dealing with a population who can't really imagine the future being much different than the present, and therefore they resist it. The task of design is to enlarge that possible future, to enlarge the urban imagination.
Yeah, thank you for the enlightenment, and I liked your lazing. Well, top-down notion from the word placemaking. I know, Mikem, you have been engaging the community for quite some time and involving people. How would you see the chance of a sort of bottom-up approach of influencing and really creating change to our urban scenery?
You want him to respond?
I want you to respond, Mikem. if you sorry.
I'm sorry. Personally, I don't think placemaking is top down. To me, placemaking can be very bottom up as well. And we make places every day. Everyone, lay person, make places every day without, maybe for the non-professionals, without them knowing. And that's why they don't understand how important their role is. And very often when they get, if they were asked to get out of a place, they do it very obediently without realizing that they have invested a lot in the place investment. That not just, physically, but also emotionally, psychologically, and socially. And so it's a great disservice, to them if we don't respect what they've done. I've been doing research when professionals actually go into communities and help, those placemakers, they are all grassroots, right? Making places very interesting, and then help them to appreciate what they've done. So instead of seeing themselves or, as just, squatters, slum dwellers, these professionals actually help them to see a very different picture that, the mainstream media, whatever, describe, to them their dwelling places. So I don't agree that placemaking is just top down. It's actually very bottom up. And as professionals, we need to go out and talk to these people and understand and learn from them. I also learned from John. John, do you remember you tell me that we can actually develop this, what he calls 咩婆仔指數咧? So like the old uncles and aunties, they always sit in these open spaces, but not in LCSD Park. Sorry if there are any LCSD colleagues here, but they find the right spot for a socializing place. And if we can, learn the attributes, that's what John has said, right? We can define the best open space or, social space or public realm, for the community. So I think we have a lot to learn from them, and they are doing placemaking every day.
Thank you, Mikem. Yes,
just to reply to the point, I think maybe it's the political climate in Hong Kong, because I agree completely with Vincent. If you come with a big idea, no one will grab it. And if you come with a big idea that involves transport department will see it as a problem. And so the advice from the people who are implementing it is say, don't come with a big idea. Come with a small idea that we can do that no one knows we're doing. And then we can help you. But there's no political guts at the moment to take on a big idea.
Thank you, Ian. We are just warm up and would like to talk something. And the lady that just showed me time's up, you see? So Stefan, I think I cannot entertain your question. But going through that, I run into a dozen of old colleagues in the housing department. They've been doing this engagement for decades. And I'm sure they can share about the joy and the, of course, the bitterness of doing engagement. Winnie is knocking her head, okay, in East Kowloon. Now, there is an urban genius, there is a talent within the community, and if you're really reaching out to them as designers away from our drawing board, there's immense chances of tapping that talent, intelligence, expertise, and that's how we can revitalize our urban design and make it really, really sustainable. With that, I would like to draw a conclusion to the section, and thank you, panelists, very much, and your attention. Thank you.